Hey guys, Jacob from Go Industrial. Today we're out here with Renee from Coastal Hills Haven, and we're going to be spraying out a pergola as well as some gutters, which is really exciting. We're both collaborating with Tint on this video to show you a quick run through of how to set up your Graco Magnum Airless sprayer, and we'll show you through the entire process from setting up to dialing in your spraying pattern as well as spraying technique and getting the job done as best as we can. So stay tuned, we'll run you through that now. First and foremost, why we're using an airless sprayer for this particular job is because it's definitely the fastest, most thorough way of actually completing this pergola. We're going to get a much thicker film build with the paint across all of our surfaces, which means protection against the elements. It's going to be a lot faster. So Renee's already started half of the job and gotten through the battens, but it takes a lot of effort and multiple weekends, whereas we'll get this done easily in one session with airless spraying. We'll have minimal overspray. It's actually quite a fun way of painting, which takes a lot of the frustration and labor out of it. Once we have our airless sprayer, I'll show you the main components and how to get yourself set up. First, we actually have the main airless sprayer itself, which has our fluid pump on the unit. We've got a couple of simple controls here, which I'll run you through in a second. The other main component you have is your actual paint hose. And then just over here, we have our main spray gun. So obviously the pump's gonna run the paint through the line into the gun, and we'll be spraying from the actual handpiece itself. So let's run you through that step. First one, screw. Make sure that power's off and the unit's turned off, so it's not under pressure, it's not gonna start pumping. We have our main paint hose. And you'll just need to tighten that up with a wrench or a spanner. Because this unit runs at a high pressure, we'll have to make sure it's more than hand tight. There we go. So once we make sure it's nice and tight, we're ready to go. Second step is connecting our handpiece. So Renee has fantastic taste and she's already sourced tint exterior to start the pergola itself. Why use tint paint? You can get it delivered directly to your door. It's low VOC, which just means that there's no harmful chemicals and toxins that are actually used to manufacture the paint. We've sprayed a lot as Go with the tint products now, and we really like the coverage, durability, and the formula to spray. So not a lot of paint companies formulate their paint to spray effectively. So we'll get set up now. We're gonna open up this paint tin, put our suction tube into the paint, and we'll show you through the initial priming process. So firstly, to start the priming process, we've already strained the paint. If you haven't used your paint for a long time, it's definitely worth straining. Otherwise, if it's brand new out of the drum, give it a good mix first. So it'll be nice and thorough here and mix it through. Because we'll be spraying or atomizing this paint, we want to make sure that there's definitely no paint skin or any paint debris in the tin itself to block up our spray line or our spray tips. That's the most frustrating thing when you start spraying and it blocks. Luckily, the tips are designed to easily be unblocked, but for a seamless finish, definitely a step worth considering. So I'll give this a good mix now. So now we've strained the paint, we've decanted into one of our iQuip buckets. We're going to show you through the priming process. So right now, my pressure dial is all the way off. My power is off. I have here my main suction hose. So this is where we're actually going to put into the paint. It's got a strainer on the bottom. Make sure the strainer is attached when you put it in the paint. This makes sure that any skin or any debris that I haven't strained out of the paint will hit the strainer first. So we're going to pop that right into our main paint pail there. And this is our drain tube. So when we're initially priming, paint's gonna come through the suction hose and out through the drain tube, because it's a bit of a cycle. It actually has to get paint primed through the pump first before we then change our spray direction and push it through our paint hose. So get a waste pail. This will be very handy throughout this process, and you're gonna detach the drain tube from the main suction hose and put it into the bucket. From here, all we have to do is turn the sprayer on, and we just have to, at a very low pressure, prime the pump. So you can see, we'll have water get flushed out, and now we have paint. As soon as you get straight paint running out of this drain tube, that's all you need. The pump's primed. I can actually attach this back against our main suction hose. And we want to make sure we definitely do the step to attach the drain tube. What happens is when we're spraying, if the machine overpressurizes for whatever reason, it'll actually relieve pressure out through the drain tube. If this isn't attached, you can picture a hose flicking up in the air like this. We're not going to get a nice coat on the pergola from down here. Keep your waste pail here, and we'll show you through setting up and dialing in your spray pat. So before we start priming, if your Graco Magnum Airless has this feature, there's actually a release ball button that we press twice or 3 times before priming. Just make sure that it's gonna prime easily and effectively. All you need to do there is push that once, twice, 3 times, and then we can work up our pressure and start priming through. So if you've started priming and there's no paint actually releasing out of the drain tube, your ball in your pump may be stuck. So that's another reason to press this priming button. That'll free up the ball and you'll be able to prime. So now it's primed through the machine, we actually need to run the paint through the main paint line. So what we'll do, we actually have our handpiece which has our trigger lock engaged while we've been doing all these steps to make sure we're definitely not going to spray ourselves or anyone around us. Release the gun lock, we'll hold down the trigger. There's no pressure to the gun right now. We'll actually turn the pressure up and we'll change it from prime into spray. So now we have paint through the paint line. Usually if you'd actually flush the machine and put it away, that'll be water that's been released as it turns across to paint. You'll notice pretty quickly. We only have to put a little bit through to make sure it's actually feeding through to the gun. And now we're ready to set up our spray guard and our spray tip and dial in our pressure. So during this step, we're actually going to turn the pressure all the way down, put the machine back into prime to release the pressure and pull the trigger into the bucket just to make sure that we actually have no built up pressure. Because if we spray our hand, it's a very serious safety concern. If you do pierce your skin at any point in time, go straight to the hospital. To start, put the gun trigger lock on so we're not going to spray ourselves. We have two main components here. We have a spray tip and we have a spray guard. And again, this has got a bit of a butterfly shape here to ensure that you're not going to place your hand in front of the spray guard or tip at any point while you're spraying. This will simply thread straight on. Make sure that you have your Graco 1 seal in the back of the guard. We have another YouTube video that we'll put in a link here to show you how to do that if you haven't already. So it's as simple as screwing this on. The guard only needs to be screwed on hand tight. It doesn't need to be tightened with a wrench or a spanner. As soon as that's in, you can see that we have a groove just here and the tip's actually machined to fit this groove in sideways. So our tip will actually go in sideways, it'll click in and you'll know when the tip's in properly because there'll be a bit of resistance as we switch the tip around. So the tip in this direction will actually spray and atomize in a fan. Reversed, it'll tighten like a water hose and it'll be a stream of product which is actually used to clean the tips out. Hence why these are called reverse A-clean tips, RAC. So there's no adjustments on the gun itself in terms of your fan width or how much paint's coming out. That's defined by your tip. So the way our spray tips work, these are our fine finish low pressure tips. This is definitely what we recommend with our Graco Magnum unit. They essentially provide less overspray. They provide a much better spray finish. They're a lot more forgiving on the pump because they only require half the working pressure to actually atomize the paint. They're definitely the way to go. So the tips have 3 numbers. The first number doubled is your fan width in inches. Today we'll be using a 312. 3 is the 6-inch fan, which is perfect for this pergola we're about to spray, and it's a 12 thou orifice or 12 thousandths of an inch. You don't really need to know that. It's big enough to spray a water-based exterior paint. Essentially, your tip size will increase with the thicker the paint it is. So if you're spraying a fence, for example, with tint exterior, you'll be anywhere between a 14 to a 17 thou tip. If you're spraying interior walls and ceilings, you'll be anywhere from 14 to 17 thou. If you're spraying stain or enamel on trim and doors, you'll be right down in the 10 to 12 range. So we actually have a spray tip guide on our website, which will provide the link in this video, or get in touch with us or Tint and we'll definitely help you out in recommending the correct spray equipment to suit your project. So with that, let's get this pressure dialed in and we'll show you through that process now. So now that we're all set up, we've got our spray tip and our spray guard on, we're gonna be adjusting our spray fan to be perfect for what we're needing to do. So the first step is we're gonna flick the unit, we're gonna turn the pressure up slowly when it's in prime, just to make sure it's primed through. We'll turn that pressure off. We're going to put it into spray. So this is our spray and prime switch. Pop that up there. And now we're going to start at our lowest pressure that we can, just above the prime indicator on the pressure dial. And we'll work up from there depending on how much pressure we'll actually need. So I'm just sitting above prime. I've got my gun lock on. It's built to pressure and it will stall when it's reached pressure. So it's not running continuously. So we'll test out the spray fan now. We'll show you how it's done. So we're using a 312, as I said, it's a 6-inch fan and it's the smallest orifice that works with exterior acrylic because exterior acrylic is quite thick. So tint exterior is pretty much the thickest paint you can get in the range. Tint interior and tint primer or prep is a lot thinner in viscosity. So we can actually get away with using smaller tip sizes. But because I'm doing so many passes today and I'm working with quite intricate battens, I do want to use the smaller tip size to get around that. We always want to be conscious of when we're dialing in spray fan that we've got enough paint coming out. We always want to make sure we're getting a nice blended gradient when we're spraying to ensure that atomization is correct. So it's not splattering, it'll just be seamless. So we'll dial that in now. As you can see here in the spray fan, I have what we call tailing or fingering. It's where we've got even product through the middle and it's too low of pressure, so we actually have a tail on either side. We don't want that, because when we blend it by 50%, you'll see that there's actually a difference here in our pattern. So what I want to do is go back to the sprayer. I'm going to adjust the pressure up slightly more, and that'll help with atomization, and it'll eliminate those tails. So now that I've adjusted the pressure higher, this should eliminate the tails. See, that's a lot better already. So now, when I'm overlapping, I'm getting a seamless spray pattern. I would recommend doing this step every single time with the sheet of cardboard before we hit the substrate you're wanting to paint. So now we'll show you the spraying technique when we get started, and we'll get this project underway. Yep, perfect. So the nature of airless spraying is that we just have pressure in the line to atomize the paint. So there's no air at all. And that's the biggest difference between a Graco airless sprayer and other competitor sprayers on the market. They're a lot slower. They don't provide as good as the finish quality. You don't get that film build or the actual protection of the paint against the elements. So in terms of spraying technique, as I mentioned, 50% overlap on each stroke, depending on what direction we're going. At the moment, I'm spraying horizontally. You can change the tip guard to spray vertically up and down if you're doing walls or a ceiling, if that's easier for you. But for now, I'm gonna be spraying horizontally. So what I'll do as well is you have to be fast. So again, like a Bunnings sprayer or a Wagner little sprayer, you're forever at the fence holding down the trigger because it's just air pushing the paint through. It's very slow, very inefficient. Airless is a lot faster, so you have to make sure that you're moving fairly quickly. If you go too slow, you have too much paint buildup and you get runs and drips. We don't want that. So you'll quickly find a balance when you're spraying, depending on what tip size you're using and what paint you're using, on how fast to move. Generally, the bigger the tip size, the faster you'll want to move again, but you'll know because there'll be a bit of a mist and it won't be a perfect gradient from left to right or up to down of when you're spraying. So for example, we're spraying here. That's a good speed there. If I move too quick, you can see that we're not getting great coverage. So spraying technique, firstly, we want to make sure that we're always spraying perpendicular to the surface. In that case, I always want to stay flat with the surface and move with it. We don't want to be flexing our wrist at the end of a spray fan, because if you picture a flat surface, if I turn my wrist, it's an uneven coat. So always want to make sure we're moving with the direction of the surface, staying perpendicular, locking that wrist in. We actually have a 40 centimeter tip extension, which is super handy right now. I don't need to have a step ladder to just reach up to this gutter. I can stand back and spray it from here. And then we also have what we call a Graco Cleanshot extension. In my opinion, this is absolutely necessary when using a tip extension in our range. Essentially, when I'm triggering on and off, the needle is actually cutting off the flow at the gun. So if you picture it, we've got this much 40 centimeters worth of built up back pressure. When I trigger on again, sometimes the gun has a tendency to spit and that ruins the spray finish. So the Cleanshot actually has a shut-off valve that actuates over 900 PSI, stops any spitting from occurring. An added benefit, also has an 180-degree swivel. So right now, if I'm standing backwards, I can actually position my Cleanshot to be in line with the surface that I'm spraying. It just makes it a lot easier. We want to ensure that we have a really nice mix between the tip size we're using and how fast we're moving. If we're putting out too much paint, moving too slowly, we'll get paint drips and we'll get paint runs. And that's really annoying because when you want a seamless sprayed finish, we can't afford drips and runs. So make sure that you dial your pressure in like we did before with a bit of cardboard and get used to the speed of spraying in general. If you work your pressure lower, you don't have to move as fast. If you're working at a higher pressure and you're putting out way too much paint, if you move slowly, you're gonna have those drips. So when we're using a Graco Airless sprayer, we're actually getting 8 times the coverage of a brush. We're getting 5 times the coverage of a roller. So we only need to be spraying 2 coats here. This is already a pre-painted gutter and pergola. So if it hadn't been pre-painted, we would have ensured that we've done the correct preparation, sprayed an undercoat, and ensure that we're getting the right materials to either stain block or to make sure that there's no mold or anything that's penetrating through. So in this case, it's pretty straightforward. We're just spraying 2 coats of our tint exterior, and that's well and truly enough micron film build of paint to protect against the elements. So congratulations, you've just finished painting your first project. Super exciting. I hope you had a great time. If you didn't, please let us know and we'll help you out. So we're going to show you right through the flushing process now. Again, this is probably the most time consuming process, but it is the most important. Rule of thumb, if you're storing for any more than 2 days, do be very thorough. So flush right through until the water's running clear. If you are going to be painting a lot sooner, please still make sure that you flush out all your tips, you flush your lines out. The worst thing we want is dried paint in any of the lines or the pump. As you go to start up your next project, you're going to have a very big headache. And we're obviously here to help, but it's not a fun experience. So let's go through the process now. Currently the machine's on, no pressure to the gun whatsoever. We're in prime position and we're just going to initially prime the paint out of the pump to transition to water. So what we'll do here is I generally have 2 buckets of water. I have a clean bucket that we leave to the side and another bucket of water that we're going to clean off the main suction hose. So we're not going to mix that in straight away with the clean water. So we'll do that now. So that's our suction hose there. Just going to dunk that into the water. Move our paint out of the way. We'll need that in a sec. Straight in. So what you want to do is you want to get a rag or a cloth and you want to try and clean off as much excess as possible. I'll just use my fingers here. Okay, so now we've got the main suction hose in a clean pail of water. We've got our drain tube in our waste pail and we're just going to prime out the paint, which you'll see. We can actually prime the excess paint back into our main paint supply. So you can straight away see how the paint's changed from a thick consistency to really thin, which is the water. So that's where you want to cut off that flow straight away, turn your pressure off. We know that water is now primed through the pump. So our next step is we're actually going to flick the unit into the spray position and we're going to work up our pressure to flush whatever paint we have in the hose back into the paint drum. So we will obviously want to recover as much paint as possible because it is liquid gold. So at a very low pressure, we're going to hold our hand down on the trigger while there's no pressure to the gun. And as we work up, we'll start to recover the paint. So you can see it there, it's nice and thick. You'll notice as the paint starts to dilute, I'll cut off the pressure. So you'll notice when you're pumping back through and spraying through the gun, that it'll go from a thick consistency to really thin and watery. That's when we know that the paint's starting to dilute more with the water. I've cut off the flow and now I'm going to flush the excess out of the paint line. So we're just going to keep it at zero, at no pressure whatsoever in the spray position. I'm going to put it back into prime. I'm going to pull the trigger to make sure there's no pressure built up. I'm going to put back into spray and then I'm going to work up the pressure again. So next step is, it's currently under pressure. I'm going to screw back on our spray guard with our spray tip. And we're going to flush out our spray guard and our spray tip as well. So now we have a second empty paint pail. I've got my spray tip and my spray guard from before. I'm going to reverse the tip and this is just clean water. And I'm just going to flush those tips out. Both ways. That way I know that any excess paint build-up's been flushed out. And I'll continue now to actually scrub this with a soft bristle brush in some clean water and make sure that the actual tip itself, both the orifice, is clean and as well as the back of the tip guard. It's really important to do this step and make sure that the back of your one seal and the guard is nice and clean because next time when you spray, this might cause any unnecessary spitting that you don't want. So we used an extension and a clean shot while we were spraying and this has got paint built up in the extension itself. So I'm going to screw that back on now and I'll actually flush these two components through just to make sure that again they're nice and clean. I'll deep clean these further once they've initially been flushed and that'll again just be either under the tap or in a bucket with some water with a brush. Screw these back on. So again, if I want to flush, relieve the pressure, pop it back into spray.
Hey guys, future Anthony here, the one who was behind the camera on site with Jacob before.
We reviewed the footage and realized there was a couple of things missing in the end there. It was Friday, so we're probably eager to knock off early. We'll just pick up sort of what we missed out and go from there. So where we left off, we had fully flushed the lines through, and by fully flushed, I mean flushed through with water until the water was clear. We had removed our tips and we put them in a bucket of water aside, ready to be scrubbed down, free from paint. The next step now is to make sure that the pump is fully cleaned out and that clear water is flowing through, and then we're going to prime some Pump Armour into the machine for storage. So let's get into that. So we've got some paint primed in the line, and what we're going to do is we're just going to take it out of the paint, just let it sort of drain back into your paint tin, then replace it with a clear bucket of water. So we've got our suction tube in a clean bucket of water. Full disclosure, to flush the machine out fully, you probably need 2 to 3 full buckets of water. So we've got our suction tube in another clean bucket of water, and we're just going to prime this until we see completely clear water through this. Sometimes you won't get it completely clear. It might be a little bit murky. Just keep priming, then clean up the suction tube, which we'll show you with some dry rags, and then another clean bucket afterwards, just to make sure that the water is definitely clear and there's no paint left in that line. So got it in prime here, suction tube in some water, drain tube in a waste pail, and let's get that all flushed out. So we just want to turn up the prime slightly. So you can see there that it's still quite murky, so it needs a bit more flushing. We want to make sure that the suction tube's well cleaned as well, so as we're priming, we're just going to use our hand and a rag just to clean any of the paint that might still be attached to the suction tube. So just keep priming that. So with this bucket here, the best we could achieve was a very light murkiness with the leftover paint that was still on the suction tube. Cleaning that all off, it's not going to be fully clear. So we're going to go through with another bucket of clear water, and that should be enough to get it fully clear in the line. And then we can show you how to pack it up with the Pump Armour. So I don't know if you can see that, but you can basically instantly see that it is clear there. Just for good measure, we're going to flush through the rest of the bucket just to make sure that there is no paint at all left in the line. So that's the bucket fully empty. We flushed through the line. This is our third bucket of water and it's completely clear now. So what we're going to do is we're going to just make sure that there isn't any paint left over on here. Reattach this to your main suction tube, and then what we're going to do is we're going to prime through some Pump Armour. Now, if you're going to be using the machine a lot and you're only going to be storing it for about 1 to 3 days in between uses, you can dilute the Pump Armour in water. So that's just a 1 to 10 ratio, so 1 part Pump Armour, 9 parts water. However, if you're going to be storing the machine for longer than that, we'd recommend priming the Pump Armour undiluted into the machine. We'll show you what both of those might look like now. So we're going to show you how to dilute the Pump Armour with some water and prime that through for short storage periods. So we've got our 4-litre Pump Armour. This also comes in a 950 ml bottle as well. So we're just going to pour 1 part Pump Armour into this water. We want it to be a light medium blue color consistency. And so we're just going to, same as before, prime this through. Cool, and as you can probably see, you can see that the Pump Armour has been sucked up into the pump and out through the drain tube. Once you have the same color consistency coming back out your drain tube, it's been fully primed into the pump and you can turn it off. Now what you want to do from here is, while it's off, switch it into spray, pull out your drain tube and make sure that you just hold it there for a second so that way it doesn't spill everywhere. Give it a shake. And that is it.
So thanks so much for watching. This has been a really fun project again with Renee from Coastal Hills Haven. Definitely check her out on Instagram. We'll have a link in the bio. He's working on some pretty awesome projects at the moment, and even this little area here is about to get a huge transformation other than just the paint. So again, stay posted for more project spray guides, as well as some tips and tricks from us at Go. We're going to cruise, have a nap, and have a beer.